Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning to all of our colleagues from India and Australia and from across the world. Welcome to our webinar today on Moving Forward with Collaboration, hosted by OneFold in collaboration with Indirapuram Public Schools. Today concludes the month-long engagement between India and Australia with another exciting series, I believe, of engagements to be announced in the near future. My name is Neil Barker, and I'm the former director of the Bastow Institute of Educational Leadership in Victoria, Australia, and I'm honoured to be your moderator for today's session. Welcome to all of you. It's lovely to have you joining us with your colleagues from around the world to consider this very important topic about how we collaborate in education and the various ways in which we do that. Joining us today are our esteemed panellists, Ms. Lisa Black, Manager of Regional Partnerships from my former workplace, the Bastow Institute of Educational Leadership, Victoria, Australia, Ms. Renu Sharma, Principal of the Indirapuram Public School, Ghaziabad, India. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I'm sure Mrs. Renu will correct me after the webinar. And Dr. Ashok Pandey, Director of the Alhcon Group of Schools, New Delhi, India. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Lovely to have you with us. We really do appreciate the time you've given us this afternoon, and we're really looking forward to hearing your experiences, some of your thoughts, some of your passions, some of the work that you've done. I think it's great when we can collaborate with each other, and certainly we have found that through this series of international webinars. So the format for today, much like the other webinars that you may have joined us for or may have joined in the last month or so, the format will be we will have short presentations from Ms. Renu and Ms. Lisa about the Sahodaya complexes in India and the communities of practice approach in Victoria. Then we'll ask Dr. Ashok to respond and to provide us with some of his thoughts about collaboration and education, some of the things you might have heard from Ms. Lisa and Mrs. Renu, some of the matters he's been engaged in, some thoughts he has about our topic today. And after that, we'll have a question and answer session. We've got a few questions that people have posed to us as they registered. We'll take, of course, most of our questions from the question and answer in the chat function as a part of this webinar. So we'll take questions from there, and we'll just have a nice discussion about the things that we've heard today, and maybe we'll have learnt a few things and a few things that we hadn't thought of before, and together create some new knowledge. Who knows? So our first presenter is Mrs. Renu Sharma. Mrs. Renu has 24 years of experience in teaching and 16 years of experience in school administration and management of school activities. She is a Master of Science in Chemistry and a Master of Education. Mrs. Renu is currently the principal of the Indirapuram Public School, Pratap, Vihar. Under her leadership, the school has received many accolades, including from the Times of India, where the school was placed at 7th rank in their survey 2019-20 under the leadership category, and has been certified as a green school at the national level. She has worked in a number of schools in India, including the Army Public School, and amongst her honours, she has been awarded the CBSE National Award on National Education Day for commendable work in the field of human rights and social equality, and the Guru Drona Award by SRM University. Thank you, Mrs. Renu. We'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Neil. A very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending upon the time zones all the attendees are in. I'm really honored and delighted to present to all the reputed principals, leaders, and educators today. I would like to talk about, today I'm here to talk about, how and on what platforms does the collaboration between the schools in India, the CBSE schools, happen. So first I'll be starting with the Sahodaya school complexes, and then we'll move on towards the hubs of learning. India has primarily two national boards, of India school education, namely CBSE and ICSE. However, there are some state boards and some foreign boards too. The CBSE is the most popular school board in India with over 20,000 affiliated schools in the country, and its presence is more than 28 nations across the globe. And all these affiliated schools are functioning under the aegis of Ministry of MHRD Government of India. In 1986, CBSE understood that there was much need of facilitating synergy of ideas among all these schools. And the only way to stimulate it was to organize the cluster of neighboring schools. Hence, in 1987, CBSE came up with the idea of establishing Sahodaya school complexes. The CBSE board conceptualized the idea, the organization of the Sahodaya school complexes, for seeing it as an excellent platform for the schools to come together and share their innovative ideas and the different practices they are doing in the school. In this, especially in this competitive world where the schools adopt several strategies and techniques to survive their competitors, the concept of CBSE Sahodaya can be seen as a constructive approach to building an understanding between the schools. And this was the time when all the schools, the neighboring schools, started voluntarily coming together and grouping together and started sharing their practices in all the aspects of school education. I would request Mohit to run the first slide now, start the presentation. So first we'll be talking about Sahodaya, what actually Sahodaya is. Sahodaya School Complex, the first slide, Mohit. The next one. So what Sahodaya actually is, it is a complex or a group of neighborhood schools voluntarily coming together to share their innovative practices. Now, Sahodaya literally means rising together. And there are about 260, more than 260 such complexes active throughout the country right now. The sharing and collaboration among all these member schools may happen in various aspects or any aspect that the schools decide on. And these can include the curriculum design, it can be evaluation, pedagogy, support services for the teachers and students, the professional growth of teachers, and so on. The vision behind conceptualizing Sahodaya complexes was to bring all the CBSE schools on the common platform and develop a common understanding among the schools while keeping pace with the current education system and also strengthen the universal values of inclusion, tolerance, empathy, and religious harmony. The mission statement to fulfill the vision of Sahodaya, it was constituted in a way to achieve quality benchmark in school education. And this particular statement in itself has a very wide spectrum. When we say that school education, quality benchmark improvement in school education, it includes everything and anything can be included in this. So it was to widen the scope for skill and education research, to organize empowerment programs for all the stakeholders, to improve the professional competency of the teachers, to encourage healthy interaction and mutual appreciation with opportunities for our students to work with each other in peer groups. We all know that how peer group is teaching is a tool where the skills can be enhanced quickly. The students learn very quickly in the groups when they are being taught or when they group together and work for a particular project. It was also to raise a winning network of schools and to create mutual and enduring values among all the stakeholders for sure. The next slide, Mohit. While this was being done, the collaboration was happening in some sense. But in due course of time, CBSE realized that there are certain challenges which need to be addressed in order to achieve the goals which are visualized while conceptualizing the idea of Sahodaya. The first challenge which I think was that the Sahodaya, to be part of the Sahodaya complex is voluntary. And only the schools which were really very proactive and very much self-motivated, self-disciplined, were doing an excellent work. Whereas some other schools, especially in the rural areas with minimal exposure, were not getting benefited to that extent. The second challenge was that the vision and the purpose of making these complexes was not being fulfilled as the Darwinism was playing on the mind. And the schools were almost convinced that only the fittest is going to survive. Hence, the competition, I think, dominated over the collaboration. The third challenge, it would not be a challenge, rather, it was the need of the hour. With the changing times, the needs were also changing. with the onset of the 21st century, the needs also changed. So CBSE felt the need of clubbing schools into smaller groups, and in continuation of CBSE's efforts for bringing equity in education among all our theatre schools and make them future ready, the board's aim was to create a school system that provides the most joyful, creative, exploratory, and vibrant school experience and enrichment for the learners, as well as a very satisfactory experience for the teachers. Hence, the Hub of Learning was conceived in 2019. The next slide. The Hubs of Learning, if I say, it was what was the mission behind the Hubs of Learning? It was to create an environment, however, the aim was same, collaboration, to exchange ideas, to exchange the innovative pedagogy, but still there was a slight difference. It was to create an environment of collaboration for learning guided by 21st century skills. Also to promote the collaborative growth and self-improvement and ensure the enhancement of quality of education. Next slide, Mohit. The hubs of learning are actually the cluster of 4 to 6 neighboring schools of the same district, preferably in the same city. Unlike Sahodaya, to be part of these clusters, these hubs is not voluntary, rather it is being decided by CBSE. Secondly, unlike Sahodaya, the hubs of learning are mixed of different kinds of schools. It can have private schools, Jawahar Navodaya Vidyalayas, Kendriya Vidyalayas, state schools, central Tibetan schools, and so on. So as to have a collective effort towards the quality in real sense. Thirdly, unlike Sahodayas, to be part of hubs of learning is mandatory. And the hubs of learning are in no way co-terminus with or an extension of Sahodaya. Next slide, please. Let's talk about the structure of the hubs of learning. The board identifies the members of each hub from 4 to 6 neighboring schools in the district, again preferably from the same city, and the schools located abroad are clustered with hubs in Delhi. One school from all these schools which are being selected in a hub is nominated as a lead collaborator school, and this is done on the basis of various criteria like board results, the pupil-teacher ratio, the innovative practices and pedagogies which are being practiced in a school, and the tenure for this lead collaboratorship is for the maximum period of 2 years. The schools in a hub, after the tenure is over, they nominate the same school or some other school after the mutual discussion if it is agreeable to all. The lead collaborator school provides hand-holding support to all the schools in the hub, and the role of hub is participatory and collaborative in nature, not merely administrative. Next slide, please. Now, if I talk about the domains, when all schools have come together, they need to work under certain domains, certain areas. The domains which have been specified by CBSE are, the schools can conduct activities and develop best practices for all the stakeholders in the areas of scholastic development, post-scholastic development. It can be school safety and security. Inclusion is one area where schools can collaborate. Community services, art and sports, assessment practices, or any other area as decided upon mutually by the hub. Now, next slide, please. Now, the schools conduct various activities, and the nature of activities can be, the first one can be the academic collaboration. It means the collaboration can happen in academic activities, which can include, like the schools in a hub can share information, they can share their expertise, their observations, their reflections on areas like annual pedagogical plan. We all know that CBSE has expects every principal to be a pedagogical leader, and to every school is expected to send its pedagogical plan annually to the CBSE. So I think this is one area, and these plans which are being sent are very diverse in nature. So I think this is one area where the schools can collaborate in a nice manner. Curriculum planning is one area. The curriculum designing can be done in a collaborative way, and the transaction strategies can be shared. The learning outcomes, CBSE has done a great job as far as the learning outcomes are concerned, and this is now up to the schools, to collaborate and understand how to go about it and how to achieve these learning outcomes. The innovative pedagogy which schools are practicing can also be shared. Schools can organize various activities together like quizzes, exhibitions, science fairs, many other competitions can be done. Schools can cooperate with each other in the area related to the needs of children with special needs. I feel this is one area which is a bit neglected here. So this is one area where schools should be collaborating, and I think this would be really good if it is possible. The second area where the activities can be done is resource sharing. The hubs are expected to add to each other's organizational and administrative skills. Hubs can exchange, they can share resources like manpower, infrastructure, etc. as far as it is possible. Hubs can do digital collaboration by sharing e-content and learn from each other's digital tools for better teaching and learning. And I feel this area of collaboration is the most relevant right now in these times, these COVID times, because every school is teaching remotely, virtual teaching is happening everywhere. And I think this is the time when we should be collaborating in this particular area the most. Hub can also collaborate in teaching learning of skill courses. CBSE again has done a very great job in this particular area by introducing so many vocational courses and skill subjects. This is one area where schools can collaborate. For example, if I am a school and if I have a good resource outside with industries and companies, I can always help my, the schools in my hub to do the tie-ups with these industries and companies. The third area where the collaboration can happen is professional development of teachers and staff. CBSE does so many training sessions, so many workshops for the teachers, for the principals, and we do all attend and send our teachers for the same. But at the same time, every school is doing so many in-service training programs. So this is one area where schools can send their staff and teachers to one another school, and they can attend one another's in-service training programs. Schools can promote academic enrichment through teacher exchange programs. The joint seminars can be conducted, the workshops can be held, exchange of instructional strategies and assessment procedures can be done. Next slide, please. Hubs can also create a sense of community, to overcome isolation. Again, this is very important in these times when we are socially so much disconnected. By making conscious and dedicated efforts to forge partnerships, by disregarding the notions of hierarchy and learn to work together, by celebrating success and by analyzing failures collectively to gain insights. Now, the next slide, Mohit. No, I think this one only. The last area which I feel where the schools can collaborate is systemic reform. Hubs can engage in systemic reforms like creating SOPs together of various procedures in the school. This way, they'll not only be updating their existing systems, but they'll also be preparing themselves for future accreditation or betterment. So this is one area they can collaborate. Now we need to understand how to next. I think you're already there, Mohit. Yes, thank you. While doing all these activities, how to go about, how to proceed, what is the methodology which should be used. It's a very general and simple methodology which is being used. CBSE guides all the schools in the hub to meet at least once a month. Before, and every hub is supposed to make an annual calendar of activities and the things where they want to, areas where they want to collaborate. And before an activity, the participating schools meet and they discuss. They discuss about the activity, the time, the mode, the venue, the theme. And after discussion, after planning everything, the execution is done. And the execution has to be done according to the things which have been planned. And after the activity is over, the schools meet again to evaluate the strengths and shortcomings. If there are some shortcomings, the improvisations and improvements have to be done for the future. And if everything went well, the appreciation should go around. I think this is all about collaboration in India through Sahodayas and hubs of learning. Thank you so much. What do you need?
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mrs. Renu. Very interesting. Some fascinating things come to my mind as I was listening to that. I like the aspiration in that title, Rising Together, a beautiful aspiration. I think there's some interesting things around the voluntary versus mandatory, the time limiting. I think that's a really interesting idea. It's not something that we do in Victoria, but I'll let Lisa talk a bit more about that. The notion of a lead collaborator, I think often provides an opportunity for the group of schools that are coming together to have at least a basis of sort of leadership in the collaboration, and always I think the notion of focusing on sort of mutually agreed places for collaboration are interesting things to me. Fabulous presentation. Thank you very much. Lovely to hear the history of the Sahodaya to sort of hubs of learning and sort of a greater focus. So thank you very much. Really interesting, and looking forward to chatting a bit more about this in the Q&A and as we go along. So now we'll hand over to you, Lisa Black. Lisa has 35 years experience in education at a school, regional and statewide level. She is currently the Manager of Regional Partnerships at the Bastow Institute of Educational Leadership in the Department of Education in Victoria, Australia. Lisa is a Fellow of the Australian Council of Educational Leaders. She leads Bastow's regional partnering work, ensuring all children and young people are given every opportunity to grow and thrive, learn and develop through a quality education system. This work includes leadership professional learning responsibility for system leadership in the government system, for literacy and numeracy reforms, and the Victorian Government Schools statewide leadership conference for more than, I think, 5,000 school leaders from government schools. So all government school leaders come together once a year, and Lisa has responsibility for organising and leading that conference. Lisa is leading the design and development of the Communities of Practice approach to collaboration in networks across Victorian government schools, and in some cases independent and Catholic schools. So over to you, Lisa.
Thanks very much, Neil, and thank you to everyone for having me here with you this morning in your country and this afternoon in Victoria. I'm situated at the moment down on the Bass Coast of Victoria, which for some of you might know, the Phillip Island Penguin Parade is probably about 2 kilometres from my house here. And we're very excited to have had a successful win in the AFL this afternoon, so everybody in the household is happy. As I said, lovely to be with you, and Mohit, could you put the slides up for us, please? Next one. Thank you. So my question to people is why collaboration? Why communities of practice? And when we thought about that question in around 2016, some of the answers were a little disturbing. Over the past 10 years, there has been virtually no improvement in learning outcomes in the Western world, even though expenditure rose by almost 20% during that period of time. So for governments that are pouring taxpayer dollars into education, this is a most perplexing conundrum. In Victoria in 2016, we turned to the experts, the academics and thought leaders to help us answer the important question of how we could lift student performance, reduce disadvantage and the high variability of student outcomes that we were seeing across our schools. And most importantly, not only across our schools, but the biggest variability was across classrooms within schools. It was Henry Ford who said, if you keep doing what you have always done, you'll always get what you always got. We had to think differently, work differently, do something else. But what? The answer was to work smarter together rather than harder alone. And that quote comes from Helen Timperley, who a New Zealand academic who we brought over to have a conversation with us about what she meant by working smarter together rather than harder alone. We had a lot of academics, didn't we, Neil, come and talk to us. Maggie Farrer from the UK, Steve Mundy from the UK and others. We are better together than we are alone. And the point made was that no one mind is greater than collective minds together. And the research tells us that the best systems in the world are working this way through purposeful collaboration. These successful systems have principals who are well connected to their peers through active partnerships or learning networks of schools. These learning networks can be thought of as communities of practice where principals prioritise areas for improvement, share and learn together to better their leadership practice. Next slide, please. In Victoria, principals had a lot of autonomy in their decision making in the government system, but they felt they had been left on their own for too long. It was strongly agreed that we needed to be able to work together to lift student outcomes across our system. But to do this, we needed principals to change the way they had worked. We had a strong culture, a strong network culture that had always operated in Victoria. But, and I've just lost the vision of everybody at the moment. I'm just going to try and get you back. There you are. Don't know what happened then. Principals had always worked in networks before, and there was a culture of sharing, but it was probably fair to say it was more coffee club than a pointed focus on improving student learning outcomes. So we needed to reposition our networks to become communities of practice where a shared vision for learning improvement through collaborative conversations was created. This was not an easy proposition, and unlike Mrs. Renu, ours was not voluntary. I think there's a lot of merit in voluntary organisations. Principals were required and mandated to be in communities of practice across Victoria. So in repositioning networks to become communities of practice, there was a strong caveat, I guess, to this proposition of collaboration between schools and with districts or regions. It requires great leadership, rapport with your colleagues, trust, honesty between schools, openness, and a willingness to share your data to inform your decision making, opening up the classroom doors and digging into the issues together. I would describe this as quite a courageous act. Could we change the slide, please? We realised that networks were operating from different starting points and that this change in how we work together would take a lot of time. So it was a long-term proposition. To adopt the new approach, support was available from what we call our senior education improvement leaders or superintendents operating out of regional areas, and through professional learning resources that was provided by the Bastow Institute of Educational Leadership. We developed resources to support principals describing what effective collaboration should look like, and some of that is on the slide that you have in front of you, and a professional learning program that we called WISE, or We Inspire System Excellence, to build the capacity of school and regional leaders to break down those barriers. The biggest challenge for principals leading this work, they told us, was the courage to lead their peers in this work. So we had a network chair who was the leader of the network, and their responsibility was to organise communities of practice within that network. But leading their peers was definitely a big challenge for them. So what did we find out from communities of practice that were operating effectively? They had an unrelenting focus on improvement, a longer term vision for improving student outcomes extending beyond 5 years. Decision-making based on trend or cohort data was regularly shared and interrogated. School principals brought their student data to the table to interrogate that together to work out what might be their common problem that they want to focus on and where do they want to take this. Regular classroom visits in each other's school to provide feedback and inform planning, a strong culture of transparency of results and practice across networks and so on. Next slide, please. Now, I know you can't read that, and it's very difficult to read, but it's impressionistic. Casting a strong vision for the future is disturbing and unsettling to the status quo. And what more disturbing and unsettling times do we have right now in the world of COVID? So a strong vision for the future is always very disturbing. So we created a self-assessment tool that spelt out what excelling collaborative practice would look like, a continuum, if you like. And we characterised the practice in 5 ways. How we work together, how we learn together, what we learn together, why we learn together, and what helps us to learn together. And then we asked our networks, through the network chair and the executive principals on that committee, to self-assess against the communities of practice tool. Well, some principals said to us when they looked at this tool, so I'm very sorry to tell you, Lisa, you've left off a category. I said, what do you mean? Well, we aren't even on the page yet. We can't self-assess against this tool because we can't even get to the emerging stage. So we knew when we heard that for the first time that we had a lot of work to do. But now, some 3.5 years later, we are getting closer to what to all networks indicating to us that they are improving their communities of practice approach, that they are heading towards that excelling category, and it's coming time really soon where we're going to need to revise our self-assessment tool to take us that little bit further. Next slide, please. The aspiration of school improvement is unsettling, I think. No one thinks really that school improvement is about them. It's about someone else. But in thinking about this, if we keep things simple, sit down with each other, identify what it is we want to improve, interrogate the problem, not to go looking straight away for solutions, but to come up with some agreed actions, implement, trial, come back together to discuss and understand, try some more, and hold ourselves accountable by asking ourselves, what have we done? Is anyone any better off after we've done it? How well have we done it? We might just get a little further along the track with purposeful collaboration that will lead to school improvement. Next slide, please. It's very important to understand where we need to head. Try and think about the desired future state and haul yourselves towards it. If we are task and project driven, where we want to be is improvement and data driven. How do we use the evidence that we have and the data that we have in front of us to head in that direction? Can we create the community that we expect of others? Everything we do as principals in our system and leaders in our system must focus on improving teacher practice through data analysis, building teacher and leader expertise. If we improve the knowledge and skills of teachers, increase the intellectual rigour and demand of the curriculum, give students increasing agency in their own learning, find the experts in the room, in those that you're collaborating with, who have the deep expertise and knowledge, and learn from them. It will not necessarily be those that have the titles that will be your biggest experts, nor your biggest advocates. In some cases, it can be quite the opposite. 80% of our best ideas come from leading practitioners. And I think the purpose of communities of practice is for us all, and I include myself and everybody involved in education, is to become better at learning. All of us becoming better at learning. If we do this, as one of my heroes, Joni Mitchell, would say, we can only get better through learning. Create time for learning together through purposeful collaboration, and you never know, we might just get there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Good. I lost you a little bit in the middle. I'm hoping it was only me that it was only my internet connection. Was everyone else okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm fine. Yeah.
Great, good. That's good to know. So it was only me, Lisa, and I've probably heard you speak several times before, so not so bad. So thank you. I think there are some. Again, you pick up some interesting issues. That sort of network chairs having to lead their peers was a complex issue, wasn't it? And so it was. We did a bit of professional learning around that idea of leading by influence, because they had no authority over others. It was more by influencing others. So I think that was interesting. And also, I think this was an interesting system view of how do you get 1,200 schools in networks working together. There was a bit of resistance at times, wasn't there? So an interesting journey. So thank you very much, Lisa, for taking us through those things. A lot of those resources are available on the Bastow website, I believe, too. So I'm sure we can provide participants with some links to some of that information. So thank you. I'm now going to ask Dr. Ashok Pandey to provide us with some of his thoughts about what he's heard today, together with some of his own considerations about collaboration in education. Dr. Ashok holds a postgraduate in physics, consultancy management and education. He's the director of the Alhcon schools in Delhi. He's the author of several articles, projects and research papers, including his educational travel log, The Pedagogical Life Essays in Educating India, which was published in 2017. His edited volume, A Design Framework for Future Schools, a collection of essays, was published in 2018, and his third book launch for Inspiring Principal Leadership was published in December 2019. He is the recipient of a Lifetime Achievement Award with the Ferguson Humanitarian Foundation International, Advaith Foundation Educational Leadership Award, the President's Award for his contribution in education. Dr. Ashok has a keen interest in quality education, teachers' professional development and sustainable development goals. He's actively engaged in interfaith dialogue and peace building, and is an active partner for the UN's hashtag Act for SDG, Social Development Goals, and a hashtag Teach for Social Development Goals ambassador. Widely travelled to over 20 countries, Dr. Ashok participated in the Global Peace Convention held in Seoul in 2019, the UN Festival for Action on Social Development Goals held in Bonn 2018, and Indo-Australian Dialogue Melbourne 2017. I think we might have maybe bumped into each other if you visited Bastow, hopefully. A thought leader, Dr. Pandey takes speaking assignments on global citizenship, education and teacher development and school leadership from across the world. Thank you, Dr. Ashok.
Thank you. Thank you, Neil. I'm sorry, this CV was a bit longer. I didn't intend it that way. I thought that you will shorten it, but you didn't do. You are very generous. Thank you very much.
There was too much good information. I had to share all of that. It was great reading. So no, don't be sorry.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Renu, Rita, and everybody working together to bring this OneFold and Indirapuram Public Schools sponsored this particular webinar. I have one very interesting thing to say about this webinar, but I'll say that at the end. I have been treated to two very wonderful presentations, Neil, I must say that. And both the presentations were about how to come together. The collaboration, in my opinion, is a very, very transformed, wise, a very pious thinking of coming together and flourishing together. I think that is at the core of any collaborative process. And that is what these two presentations have brought out to us. And you see, Lisa said that the best institutions, educational institutions in the world are the best networked. And I 100% agree to that. In fact, I would flag the opposite of it, that if you are not one of the best institutions, perhaps you are not well networked. I think I would not be wrong if I say that. And if we combine these two statements, I think I can say with no hesitation in my mind that collaboration is a magic bullet for us to do well as educators and to do well for our institution and for our children. So that is something very, very good. And therefore, the people of the same tribe, people of the same thought, they come together. And the slogan should be, in my opinion, one tribe, one dream. So if one tribe goes with one dream, and that dream is what? That all our children should do well. Equity, excellence for everybody. And that is the defining purpose of all educational institutions. And therefore, I think, in our own pockets, we may be centers of excellence, we may be islands of excellence, but that excellence, for the very reason that it has not been shared with others, I think it does not qualify to be 100% excellence, in my opinion. Therefore, at the core of collaboration is sharing, caring, connecting, and communicating. And when we do all these things, then only we build a community of practice, as Lisa was saying. And therefore, I think we should insist upon, as the two distinguished panelists have said, that we have to have a very, very clear purpose as educational institutions. We should have very clear direction. We should have a very strong collective commitment. And of course, how do we do all these? We can only do it when our targets are clear, our indicators are well defined, and our timelines are adhered to, because we do not have the luxury of time when we are working with children. So once we do this, then probably our collaboration will be very, very successful. The two examples which Renu has given, the Sahodaya complex and the hub of learning, I think both of them had the same purpose at the core of it. The only difference was when we came out with Sahodaya complex in 1986-87, it was a loose federation. It was not very well structured. It was volunteered, so rubrics were not very cleared. The leadership in the Sahodaya complex, without any intention, became very, very centralized, you see. And the periodicity of meetings and connectings and being in conversation with each other was very, very scarce. And therefore, we learned from those limitations and we built on the strengths of that. And we came out with this hub of learning where a lot of mandatory things are there. And still we have the autonomy to work within that. The groups are very smaller and it is distributive leadership rather than the centralized leadership as we had. And since we are in very, very immediate vicinity of each other, sharing of practices, sharing of resources, and working for the teachers and children have become very, very easy for us to follow. So I think we are on the right track, but seeing the presentation that Lisa has given, I think we can bring in a lot more clarity into it, clarity into reporting, clarity into following the rubric, and clarity into following the monitoring as to how the constituents of the hub of learning are progressing with each other. I think this is a beautiful arrangement in my opinion. And the last two things that I want to say is that any such thing which has such a secret purpose, I think we have to invoke a little bit of Zen masters in us. So a Zen of being a mentor, a Zen of being a proactive in what we do, a Zen of, being giving, a Zen of being without any quid pro quo. We only give, we learn from each other, and we see value in growing together. So this invocation of Zen has to come for any collaboration to succeed. And the last thing, Neil, I want to say, I want to give you the greatest example of collaboration, and it has happened in the 21st century. It has never happened before, and I must thank COVID-19 for that the collaboration at a global level through these webinars, which all of us are having today. The problems of education, we realize for the first time that they are global in nature. So a school in Kenya or a school in Victoria or in India, I think our problems are similar. The context may be different. And you imagine in the last 4 months, how the entire global community of educators have come together to share our practices and to tell that, look, how we can help each other, how we can reach out to the children, how we can bring the best practices. And I think this is the greatest collaboration, which we have not named it as such, but I think we do not require any bigger evidence of community of practices than this. Thank you very much, Neil. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Ashok. Yes, that was a lovely summary, and I think you brought up some lovely points about that. Those notions of our shared commitment to sort of equity and access for all, and it's when we come together that we provide greater opportunities for that than our own schools each by themselves. When we come together, there are much bigger opportunities. And I, like you, was reflecting on the same thing this morning as I was out in my garden thinking about our webinar this afternoon, and thought, I don't think this webinar would have happened unless COVID had required us all to stay in our houses and units and apartments.
Absolutely.
Yes, I must say over the last few months I've been involved in some really interesting webinars, sometimes participating and sometimes just listening and enjoying the conversations. So so it does bring me to my first question, and I'm going to just put this out generally, and you can each respond or not respond as you'd like. But it does take me down this very interesting line, and it comes from a couple of questions that were posed when people enrolled. And the question was more broadly about what do we just looking for my notes here. Here we go. How do we see this was from Asha and Sanjeet as they enrolled. They were asking about the future of education and schooling post-COVID. I wonder whether I could frame it in the notion of, as we've just talked about, Dr. Ashok, I wonder we could frame it in the notion of how can collaboration be a driver or a supporter or a builder of a sort of improved post-COVID education across systems across the world? A big question. So would anyone like to start? Dr. Ashok, you look as though you're... Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much. I would love to take it, and then my other panelists can chip in or help me. When we are talking of post-COVID, we are venturing into an area which is absolutely unknown and uncertain. Now imagine to navigate an unknown and uncertain scenario. It is one mind which is more capable, or it is a collective mind which is more capable. So we can all sit down within our groups and find out what are the possible scenarios. And the possible scenarios are actually the possible dilemmas that we are going to face. You know, somebody, Neil, has very beautifully described this situation as cascading dilemmas, you know. So we decide that, okay, we can reopen the school tomorrow, and suddenly there is a recurrence or there is one reported case, and then we go into a shutdown, right? So it is a cascading dilemma. And I think the collaboration is the only magic bullet, as I said, where many of us can sit together and many of us say that, okay, we will share the same boat and we will sail together in it. And apart from giving us a clear direction, it will give us a lot of hope, a lot of resilience, and a lot of courage and confidence for us to navigate through the uncertain scenarios.
Can I?
Thank you. Yes, go, Lisa, please.
I don't know how others feel, but I don't feel like I have ever talked so much over the last 4 or 5 months and collaborated with so many people in my life before.
Yes, absolutely.
It's amazing. And while it's amazing that on a daily basis, everything is changing with as more news and new news comes through, and schools are closed, schools are open, we're back indoors, we're freed up a little bit, now we're back indoors again. It's changing in the blink of an eye. But what I think what we have learned is our technology, our skills have gotten a little better. And I expect that those skills and those technologies will improve exponentially as we continue to use them and learn a little more about them, because in the first instance, our teachers were thrown into the deep end and tried to work out what it is they were going to do, what homeschooling was going to look like. And they've done an absolutely marvellous job the world over, no question. How we sustain it is going to be interesting going forward, because we also miss each other. So while we're collaborating, there's something about the human connection and being closer together that we're all wanting more of, and we can't have it at the moment. So there's a lot of thought leaders, a lot of thinking, a lot of academics the world over. I hope they're busily writing about this time so that we can learn and reflect and understand it a little better to help us cope going forward. I also think our children are, how long is a piece of string? Some kids are thriving in this new COVID, but I'd have to say not too many. They miss the exact same things that we miss. So it's keeping the connections that's really important, and understanding who's connecting and who's withdrawing, and ensuring that we pull them in so that we're caring for each other deeply and caring for each other's well-being, because I think the other side of excellence and equity is the well-being piece that's a critical piece to the thriving and excellence. I probably don't need to say too much more, but can we keep collaborating? Can we keep connecting? And can we do more of this as we go forward? I think there's a lot of it we don't want to lose.
And do you comment on this topic?
Actually, very rightly said by both the panelists. I feel the future of education is going to be better than what we were having and we are having, because these are difficult times, and not only teachers and leaders and educationists are learning and evolving with time. Even the students are doing same, and I am sure of the fact that in future the teaching is going to be blended, as Lisa very correctly said, that the technology is going to play its role, and I feel that students will have more of self-directed learning in future, and maybe they will also be more answerable to their results and their performance, that answerability is going to come in their attitude. That's what I believe in.
Thank you very much. I thought we might, because we've sort of looked at a whole lot of things at a very high level. We were talking then about the future, and those things are, you can always approach them from a very macro level. I thought it might be interesting for the purpose of some of our participants here today, might like to hear some examples, if you have any, about specific collaborative activities, opportunities, projects, programs that brought some schools together where there was clear evidence of improved learning outcomes for students, and what the conditions of that looked like. Renu, you seem to be nodding there. Would you like to come in on this question?
I would like to share, one of the activities where our schools, in the Sahodaya collaborators, it was, as very rightly said by other two panelists also, it is all about collaboration and how we communicate and collaborate and share our ideas. The theme was any innovative pedagogy or any innovative strategy of teaching, as far as possible, if art can be integrated into it. So we took this theme, and in my school, we used Worli art. Worli is a traditional art in India. This art was used as a tool to teach mathematics. And not only mathematics, it was also linked with, various other subjects like value education, social studies, and so many other subjects. So interdisciplinary approach was brought, and the infographics were created in the same manner, and the students were taught through it. This particular art integrated learning was integrated into the teaching, and students were taught various subjects using this tool, this art. So this was also sent to CBSE, and I think CBSE is in a process of creating the calendar out of it. So this was one example where we collaborated in our Sahodaya group.
And could you see, so how many schools was that amongst? I'd be interested to know. And did you see improvement in all of those schools, or just a few, or?
No, all the schools in the Sahodaya were, by mutually we all decided, we took like different schools took different art forms. Like the theme was to take an art which has to be used as a tool to teach. So every school took a particular art, and my school took Worli. So different arts were used to teach various subjects. And I think 15 schools were there. So 15 different infographics were created, different lesson plans were created, and that was presented to CBSE.
Good. Anyone else like to come in on this question?
Yes. I'll use a COVID example. We were very concerned in Victoria about our foundation students who are pre-reading age, and we very quickly decided that we would use our literacy master trainers that we had put through a program over the last few years, exemplary teachers, literacy teachers from the classroom. And we created a program called F2 reading for teachers by teachers. And I think the peer teaching concept that you can do online is about to become a really dynamic space for professional learning for teachers. So what our teachers did, they designed themselves a series of webinars, and then there were pre-recorded instruction on particular areas of reading for those children who were yet to be able to read. And then the webinars became the collaborative space to talk about and talk about what they had learned through the pre-recorded instructional videos, if you like. It was a very dynamic approach, and our foundation teachers, who were because it wasn't just the teachers who were worried about their little preparatory children, it was the parents in particular, what to do with their little kiddies, and the students themselves who were missing the school environment, only having just started at school in February for us. So that particular approach to learning, I think, was a really dynamic one and something that we're going to learn to do a lot more of.
Yeah, Neil, may I come in for a minute?
Yes, please, please.
Yeah, so I just want to bring in here, that this collaboration, if it is directed at fostering student agency and fostering teachers agency, so we have seen it through our experiments and collaborations, that this works very fast. And if teachers agency is invoked, I'm sure it will affect the students' learning and growth. But students fostered agencies, they start learning as a peer, and that we have seen works very well. So they become self-responsible, they become leaders, they start organizing things themselves, and they start interning with organizations. So that we have seen working out very, very well. And in a recent example where students collaborated with some multilateral agencies of the United Nations, we found that they became advocates for social development goals. They became online communicators, and they started documenting their actions for change. So I think those are the things which are very visible in the children as they go along collaborating with each other.
I think you're right. Those notions of teacher agency and student agency, I think, are really important, and it perhaps goes back to what Lisa and Renu were both talking about, was this interesting thing in collaboration between the voluntary and the mandatory. I think there's an interesting tension that's there, and I don't know if either of you would like to comment on your experience with the sort of mandatory voluntary. Lisa, Renu, and Ashok.
Yeah, Renu, would you like to go first?
Yeah. Yes. See, when as Neil is talking about voluntary and mandatory, Sahodayas were voluntary, and as Mr. Ashok said, that the things are too much centralized to a particular school. And I also mentioned that the schools which were really very self-motivated and self-disciplined were doing good job there. And not every kind, the main motto of CBSE was not being fulfilled, because not every kind of school was coming in on the same platform. Only, similar kinds of school, you can say, they were coming together. But when I talk about mandatory thing, and also in hubs of learning, the groups were smaller. As Mr. Ashok said, it was easy to manage and administer. And also it was made mandatory. But at the same time, the autonomy was also there. The schools were free to have their own activities in their own way, in their own aspects. So I feel if too much of, if I compare voluntary and mandatory this thing, if things are made too much mandatory, somewhere the freedom and the creativity is being killed. But I feel that CBSE kept this in mind, and that autonomy was also there. So I think the answerability would be more, and the administrative issues would be less as far as from CBSE points of view. So it would be easier and more, it would be better working in collaboration happening now. How this came in 2019, and after that, this COVID time has come. So I'm sure in the future, we are going to see a great job in this particular field of hubs of learning.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what Renu has said is fantastic. Neil, the human nature is that you give complete freedom. We don't like that also. And you make everything completely regulatory, strangulatory. We don't like that also, right? So I think we are programmed to work somewhere in between, right? And I think, and if you make something mandatory, maybe mandatory is a very harsh word, but I would say it it is nudging you to be intrinsically motivated and look for some extrinsic benefits out of it, you know. Mm-hmm. So I think this kind of arrangement is a better arrangement. Mm-hmm. And you know, 5 people working together, I think they can understand each other, adjust with each other, tolerate each other, accept each other much more easily than 20 or 30 or 50 people working together. So that is what we are coming from.
Yeah. Lisa, you got anything?
I agree completely.
I thought you might say one of the things that when we were sort of developing the communities of practice approach was the networks were formed. They were mandatory. You had to be in a particular geographic network. So a group of 25 schools had to be involved. Whether they came together or not was never mandated, but it was expected. So it was, you were never told that you had to. We just, the system said, we expect you to come together. And so it was very close to mandatory, but, and some people took it that as mandatory, and maybe it could have, as you said, Dr. Ashok, it could have come back a bit more to the middle, I think, at times. Yeah. Because I think you're right, that notion of the agency for students and teachers, and also I think for principals, for school leaders, the agency in work, it gives us ownership, doesn't it? If we own what's happening rather than being forced, dragooned into the work, then I think we're likely to get better outcomes. So it leads me down this thought: what are the I'll start with the negatives. What do you think bad collaboration looks like? What are the things that get in the way? So what does bad collaboration look like? What are the sorts of barriers that get in the way of collaboration, do you think?
Yeah.
Lisa, go.
Yeah, one of the things I think is a barrier is in collaborating, quickly jumping to solutions to the problem that you're trying to solve. Solution shopping can sometimes lead to picking up the bad programs one after another and trying to implement what are essentially never going to work. So I think there's something to be said for really understanding why you're coming together and being really focused on that problem, interrogating it deeply before you start looking towards solutions. That would be a Vivian Robinson approach to trying to problem solve, I think.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, Neil, I'll come in.
Yes, please.
Okay, so I think the 2 or 3 barriers which I see, again, I come from the basic human nature. Whether it is individual or organizational, you know, you have a sense of competition, right? So that nature of competitiveness, when we narrow it down, then it starts working against collaboration. And therefore, we have to redefine it a kind of collaborative competition. Then probably we'll be able to overcome the barrier number 1. And the barrier number 2 comes from the difference between jealousy versus envy. So if we see that somebody is doing better, we can respond to it in 2 ways. First, that we come back and say, oh, they're doing, I don't know how they are doing it, what are their tricks and techniques and all that. Another is that we open out and go and reach out to them, compliment them, and tell them how you're doing it. Would you like to share with me? Then you have opened the door of collaboration. So this is the second barrier. And third, of course, is I think it is a question of our own human magnanimity and a growth mindset, which will propel us to the path of collaboration, right? I mean, if all the children of the world are assets of the world, then a child does well in Australia or in Ghana, how does it matter that he or she is not my child? I think we have to develop that world view, a growth mindset, and then only we can be a qualified collaborator, in my opinion.
I agree. I agree with both the panelists. I think competition is one area which is a very, it's a barrier. And the second one is jumping onto the conclusions and, solutions without giving enough time to discuss and collaborate on that. So I totally agree with both of them.
I think what's interesting, I heard someone once say, and I think it arises, Ashok, out of this notion of the competition, the jealousy versus envy, is collaboration is not where, because we had this, Lisa, at the very start of some of our networks, where schools would come together and they would just tell each other what they were doing. And someone said, and we decided, and more recently we talked about this, I was talking to this with some people and said, well, that's really just a meeting. It's not collaboration.
Yeah.
Because unless you're doing the work together, you're doing the work together, you're just meeting, you're not collaborating. Yeah, I heard it described as a bit as educational tourism, where you just sort of tour and look at somebody's thing and then go away. Yeah. Go. Sorry.
Absolutely. I think Lisa used a very beautiful phrase, solution shopping, you see. So we go and say, oh, you did it, please just tell me in 5 minutes because I also want to do. No, I think collaboration is a process. And that process is based on a vehicle called learning, right? And then on that process, we have to move from point A to point B. At point A, we are not happy, and point B, we are happy. I think that is what the process of collaboration is, as you rightly said. Yeah.
I think there's a danger too in seeing the success of someone else, another group of schools that are collaborating, and saying, oh, we better do what they're doing. And and then we will have the same success. That is not necessarily the case.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. You're right. Absolutely.
Okay, so we're coming rapidly to the end of our time. In fact, we're a little bit over our hour, but it's been such a great conversation. One quick question here I had from the Q&A. Someone asked whether the Sahodaya were government schools involved in that? So yes. Yeah, so quick question, quick answer. Great.
Renu, go ahead, please.
Yes,
Renu, you go ahead. Yeah.
Sahodaya, as I already said, there's no rubrics as such. There's no rigid structure which is being proposed by CBSE and Sahodaya. Yes, government schools can be part of it, but since too much of freedom was given, too much of autonomy was given. So out of more than 20,000 schools, CBSE schools in India, right now only 4,500 schools are into Sahodaya, and majority of them are private schools. By rule, yes, government school can be part of it, but because of this too much of autonomy and all that, so the participation and due to the lesser exposure to these schools, they were not part of it in most of the cases. My answer to this.
Yeah, what has happened, Neil, I'll tell you, there are over 20,000 schools in the CBSE system. And CBSE has identified 5,000 almost schools as hub leaders, which means on an average, every hub leader has 4 to 5 schools with them. And out of the 20,000 plus schools, the government schools are also there around 3,000 to 4,000. So they are also very much part of it. But how much, as Renu said, they are integrated into it and how much they are part of it in a day-to-day basis, that is something that we are a little skeptic about.
Okay, by way of summary, I'm going to put it could be hard, could be an easy question, I'm not sure. If you had one piece of advice to provide to a school about them collaborating with others, what would you say to them? One piece of advice. Sorry, I know that's really hard because there's probably 100 things you'd want to say, but one piece, what would you say?
So I go first?
Please.
Because I was the last speaker, so I'm going first now.
Good.
So I think you should be highly motivated by the fact that you are going to learn from your partner and do some research and find out what is the best your partner is doing. And then you start collaborating from there, not from what you are doing the best. You know, because learning is something called, we use the word surrender spirit, you know. So you surrender yourself to learning, and then only the collaboration will start. So we should not demand trust. I think we should give trust in somebody's doing well, and that will work out well.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Shall I go next? Or I'll be the last one, because I was the first one as a panelist.
Yeah, no, true. Let's go back. So Lisa, you're next.
You were always in the middle. Yeah.
So I think as you know, one thing which I would recommend, I would say to the school which is going into collaboration is that have an open mind. Be open to criticism, be open to everything, and have faith. That faith system, trust system has to be developed. That is very important. If there's no trust, I don't think any collaboration can happen. So open your mind, trust your buddies, you know, the team, the schools in your team, and then go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And just building on that, I would say, don't be afraid. Step into the space. Like COVID, we can do this. We've got this. And we just have to take the step. And there's a lot in it that we can learn from each other. So much that we can learn from each other that we can't do on our own. Good luck, everybody.
Well, thank you so much, all of you. I feel as though we have really just scratched the surface on this. There are so many more questions that are in my mind, and I know the depth of experience from each of you with your journeys that you've been on in terms of collaborating with others, that we could continue this really rich conversation for hours and hours. But I suspect that the people who've joined us for an hour will gradually start to drop off if we continue. But
yeah,
but
right.
However, I do believe that we could that there'll be some way of being able to sort of reach out and find other questions from each of you, hopefully track you down on LinkedIn or something like that, to follow up with any things that they might have in terms of the advice. So so thank you very much for generously giving us your time this afternoon. It's a topic that's sort of dear to my heart, and I know for each of you joining us today that that you have a real passion for this work also. So I'm going to sort of draw it to a bit of an end. This really concludes the fourth of this international webinar series between India and Australia, and I believe that that OneFold, in collaboration with Indirapuram schools, will be looking at another series of these. So keep searching through the channels that you heard about this webinar. Keep your eye on those. Keep your mind open to and your eyes open to look for other opportunities here. I personally, and I'm sure on behalf of everyone that's been involved in the Australia-India month of collaboration, would like to thank OneFold and Indirapuram Public Schools for providing such a rich opportunity. And Rita Singh in particular, who's really driven all of this. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to name her, but I'm going to do it anyway, because I think she deserves the accolades for putting this collaboration together across quite a broad range of topics, which I think have been really interesting. So on my behalf and on behalf of everyone else, thank you very much to the organisers. I'd sort of finish by saying one thing today. We've talked about collaboration, and we've had our short collaboration here because I think we have been not just tourism, but a bit of working together, thinking together about what this looks like. And these are sort of three gems that I think I've got from each of the panelists, and that we're better together, that rising together is what collaboration brings us, and that by hubbing our learning, that we can really get to the deep collaboration. And as we've said, this can be the magic bullet if we are careful and we use it wisely. So thank you again to our panelists. Thank you to all of you who've joined us from around the world. It's been a lovely conversation, and look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you. Thank you, Neil. You have been awesome moderating this particular panel. Thank you, Lisa. And congratulations on winning the IFL today. Congratulations. Thank you, Renu. It's been awesome having you.
Thank you, Ashok. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. If you are listening to us from anywhere, God bless you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohit, Ashish. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.